Hello and welcome to The World Today here on China Global Television Network with me, Mahia Mutua in Nairobi. Chinese President Xi Jinping has inspected the Xiongan New Area in North China's Hebei province. He toured the startup zone to review construction progress and visited China Huaneng Group and the Xiongan campus of Beijing No. 4 High School to learn about the development in the area. He also greeted representatives of officials and staff from organizations that have been relocated or are under construction as part of the project to relieve Beijing of functions non-essential to its role as the nation's capital. Meanwhile, China's Vice President Han Zheng and Kenya's Deputy President Kithure Kindiki are at this hour attending the Kenya-China Business Forum in Nairobi. Zheng arrived on Sunday for an official visit aimed at strengthening bilateral ties and expanding economic cooperation between the two countries. The Kenya-China Business Forum is focusing on China's decision to introduce zero tariffs on imports from 53 African countries with diplomatic relations with Beijing, a policy that takes effect on May the 1st. Now, the move is expected to unlock new opportunities for Kenyan exporters and boost trade between the two nations. Earlier on Monday, business leaders and policymakers held discussions on how Kenya can leverage the policy to expand access to the Chinese market. Let's turn to the latest from the Middle East this hour. Explosions have rocked several parts of Tehran after Israel announced a new wave of strikes targeting infrastructure in the Iranian capital. Prior to this latest attack, Israel says it hit several Iranian weapons production sites in a series of overnight strikes on Tehran. The Israel Defense Forces say the targets include an Iranian army training base equipped with anti-aircraft missiles, weapons production sites of the Iranian Defense Ministry and the IRGC Air Force, as well as the headquarters of the Iranian Intelligence Ministry. Israel says the strikes are part of a phase to deepen the damage to Iran's core system. Here now is Saper Saremi in Tehran with the latest.
Tehran was relatively quiet yesterday, but this morning there were several explosions in the city. As I heard the sounds, I heard the explosions, they were powerful, but I could feel that they were distant from here. So I also read in the news that those explosions were in east of Tehran, targeting IRGC missile arsenals. About about the atmosphere and the ambience here on the ground, I have to tell you that people are concerned. People are anxious. Why? Because President Donald Trump has threatened Iran to target the power plants here. So that has created a lot of anxiety among Iranians, and also it's making Iranians more and more pessimistic toward Donald Trump, because even those who oppose the government are now becoming more pessimistic toward him, because he said help is on the way. I was talking to one of my friends yesterday. He said, Trump said help is on the way. What kind of help is this? So his threat regarding the power plant is creating a lot of anxiety among people, because if they hit the power plants, there's going to be a wide blackout in different cities, including Tehran. So what we are seeing here, as I said, it's a vicious circle. US and Israel strike, and then Iran retaliates by firing missiles. But I think if the US targets power plants in Iran, it will this war will take it to another level, because the Iranian army and also IRGC, they have warned that if the power plants here are targeted, power plants of the regional countries and also the desalination system will be attacked by Iran. So I think so far in the last 22 days, we've had a pattern of escalation. But if power plants are attacked, I think we will see another round of escalation, which is going to be, according to so many analysts, which is going to be very dangerous.
Meanwhile, Iran warns it will immediately close the Strait of Hormuz if the U.S. attacks its power plants. Tehran was responding to U.S. President Donald Trump's threat to target Iran's power plants if the country fails to fully reopen Hormuz within 48 hours. Now, the Iranian armed forces suggested 4 punitive measures in response. 1, the complete closure of the Strait of Hormuz until damaged plants are rebuilt. 2, the targeting of all Israeli power, energy and communications infrastructure. 3, the destruction of all U.S.-owned companies in the region. And 4, the targeting of power plants in any country hosting U.S. military bases. Now, the Iranian Foreign Ministry said the Strait of Hormuz is not blocked and navigation continues with necessary measures under wartime conditions. It insists full stability in the waterway requires an end to U.S. and Israeli aggression. Well, for more on that, our correspondent Michael Marilia explains the potential impact of the U.S. and Iran trading strikes on energy facilities in the region.
Now, President Trump has warned that he will obliterate Iran's power stations. What does that mean for Iran? Well, for a start, it will have to defend several sites. Iran gets most of its power from 3 facilities: the Damavand station near the capital Tehran, the Kerman plant in the southeast, and Rakhmin in the west. That plant is close to the border with Kuwait and Iraq, and that may be significant because the U.S. has bases in both those countries. There's also the Bushehr nuclear power plant, and again, that's close to Kuwait, in fact, directly across the Persian Gulf. Now, we know Iranians will suffer if the power grid is damaged. Just over 30% of Iran's electricity is used in residential areas. But an attack could also hurt the economy. Roughly 35% of power usage is linked to industry. In other words, the factories that employ people. Nearly 20% is for commercial purposes and public services. For example, shops and office buildings. But Iran is not backing down, saying it could attack U.S. infrastructure in the region, including energy facilities. It's also warned that it may target desalination plants in the Gulf. There are more than 400 of these sites which convert seawater into fresh water. Gulf states need these plants because they have very little natural fresh water. The average 120 cubic meters per person per year. Now, for context, if a country has less than 500 cubic meters per person, then it's classified as water scarce. Gulf states, as we've seen, have on average less than a quarter of that amount. So water is a big issue. And those countries may feel the pinch if these facilities take a hit. Nearly a fifth of Saudi Arabia's water comes from desalination. Oman, almost a quarter. In the UAE, it's more than 40%. Kuwait, almost half. And in Bahrain and Qatar, we're looking at 60%. Of course, we don't know how much damage Iran can inflict, but it is sending a clear message, showing that it's willing to respond if the U.S. follows through on its threats.
Well, U.S. pressure on Iran over the Strait of Hormuz is drawing mixed reactions across the region, with warnings about possible impacts on international shipping. CGTN spoke with a senior Houthi official in Yemen about the recent escalation and what steps the group may take to support Iran.
شدن تهدیدات آمریکا در خصوص نیروگاه‌های ایران بلافاصله اقدامات تنبیهی انجام خواهد شد. 1. تنگه هرمز به طور کامل بسته می شود و تا نیروگاه‌های تخریب شده ما بازسازی نشوند این تنگه باز نخواهد شد. 2. همه نیروگاه‌های برق، زیرساخت‌های انرژی و فناوری اطلاعات رژیم صهیونیستی.
Meanwhile, Israel has struck a main bridge linking Lebanon south to the rest of the country. Sunday's attack came after Israel ordered its military to destroy all crossings over the Litani River and to step up the demolition of homes near the southern border. Lebanese President Joseph Aoun condemned the attack, warning it could be a prelude to an Israeli ground invasion. Aoun said the strikes aim to cut geographic links south of the Litani River, block humanitarian aid and create a buffer zone to expand Israeli presence. He urged the international community to act immediately there. In the capital Beirut, thousands of displaced families are setting up tents, having fled their homes with few belongings. Now, the CELAC summit and the inaugural CELAC Africa high-level forum wrapped up in Bogota over the weekend. Presidents from Colombia, Brazil and Uruguay called for regional unity amid war and geopolitical fragmentation. Michelle Beg reports from Bogota.
Leaders from Latin America and the Caribbean called for regional unity this weekend and sent strong messages against the current geopolitical fragmentation. Colombian President Gustavo Petro hosted his counterparts at the 10th summit of the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States, CELAC, held in Bogota.
In Latin America, despite our problems, we have learned to embrace one another as partners and as brothers. We do not destroy our neighbour's home. We do not kill his child or his mother with a missile. We understand that a boatman carrying an illicit substance in the Caribbean because he has no other way to feed himself does not deserve to be hit by a missile that destroys his family and his dreams. Solutions can be found simply by talking. That is what I told Trump the day I met him in person.
In a high-level forum with delegates from Africa and CELAC, Brazil's president criticized, without specifically mentioning the United States, the conflict against Iran and the Cuban embargo. He called for an end to outside interference.
Latin America and Africa still do not have adequate representation on the UN Security Council. The wars in Ukraine, Gaza, Iran, and so many other conflicts are pulling us further away from the path of development. They are creating economic, social, and political consequences around the world. They are driving up energy and food prices. We need to keep the South Atlantic free from outside geopolitical disputes.
The mission of CELAC Africa is to rebuild a South-South cooperation framework that strengthens partnerships in trade, investment, infrastructure, and development. The African Union and CELAC together represent nearly 2 billion people.
The colleagues who are here in the final communiqué, may we clearly mention this forum's support for the countries of Haiti, Venezuela and Cuba. This is the strong support that we must show to all those who do not wish us well or want to continue dominating this world.
The CELAC summit closed with a ceremony to mark the organization's handover of the pro tempore presidency to Uruguay.
Choosing peace is a decision that demands dialogue when it is easiest to break it. It demands institutions and it demands reconciliations when peace seems irreconcilable.
A call for peace from Latin America and the Caribbean. Michelle Begues, CGTN, Bogota.
And that's it for this edition of The World Today. Do stay with CGTN. I'll be back shortly with more news from the continent in Africa Live. We look at China and Kenya cooperation ahead of China's zero tariff policy for African countries set to start in May. Mali sets free at least 100 militants in a deal set to end fuel blockades in the country. And we see how experienced practitioners and newcomers are embracing Chinese martial art in Benin. Hello and welcome to Africa Live, wherever you're tuning in, right here on CGTN. I'm Mahia, Mutua in Nairobi. Let's check out what else is coming up on the program. The International Energy Agency sounds the alarm over an escalating global oil crisis. And in sports, Arsenal humbled by Manchester City, dismantling the quadruple dream. Welcome to the program. Now, China's Vice President Han Zheng and Kenya's Deputy President Kithure Kindiki are at this hour attending the Kenya-China Business Forum in Nairobi. The Vice President arrived on Sunday for an official visit aimed at strengthening bilateral ties and expanding economic cooperation between the two countries. The Kenya-China Business Forum is focusing on China's decision to introduce zero tariffs on imports from 53 African countries with diplomatic relations with Beijing, a policy that takes effect on May the 1st. Now, the move is expected to unlock new opportunities for Kenyan exporters and boost trade between the two nations. Early on Monday, business leaders and policymakers held discussions on how Kenya can leverage the policy to expand access to the Chinese market. Well, let's get more on that story now. Our reporter Robert Nagila is following developments at the Trade Forum and exhibition. He now joins us live with the updates this hour. Robert, thank you for speaking to us. The Chinese Vice President, as well as the Kenyan Deputy President and other trade officials are attending today, as we've been hearing. What is the latest from there, and what are the goals from the forum as well as the exhibition?
Absolutely, Mahia. Well, I can tell you that session with the Chinese Vice President and the Kenyan Deputy.
Well, we seem to have lost Robert there. We will try and get him back. Meanwhile, last month, Kenya secured an early harvest trade deal with China, granting duty-free access of 98.2% of Kenyan exports. CGTN's Beatrice Marshall had a sit-down with the Kenyan Principal Secretary for Trade, Regina Ombam, to get the significance of this deal.
Madam PS, thank you very much for your time. Now, Kenya recently secured an early harvest agreement with China, granting around duty-free access for around 98.2% of Kenyan exports. For the benefit of our viewers, explain to us what this early harvest agreement means.
Thank you, Beatrice. The early harvest agreement is actually an incremental way of getting into a free trade agreement where you get to liberalize all your goods when you're trading with a different country. Now, this process of actually getting into a comprehensive free trade agreement takes a long time. And so the early harvest agreement comes in as an incremental way of actually targeting those products that can be of value to a country so that you start liberalizing them, allowing for import duty for those products to be traded at an early time so that you can actually start reaping some benefits in trade even before you do your comprehensive free trade agreement.
So which specific Kenyan sectors would you say are going to gain from this duty-free access?
So from this duty-free early harvest arrangement, we're actually looking at our horticulture and fresh produce sector benefiting immensely. Beatrice, imagine without that zero tariff, this sector was being charged an import duty of around between 10 to 25%. So now it's going to zero, and that is a big plus in itself. The other sector is our tea and coffee sector, which was getting around between 6 and 15%. Now that is also going to zero. Then we have our cut flowers, which were getting an import for 4%. Now that is also going to zero. A very good place that we are in now is actually China opening up for our avocados, which is now going in for zero tariff. And this is already, we even without the zero, we were already seeing us getting around $20 million last year out of the avocado business that we are doing. We are also targeting our meat, and that is another area that is actually going to, again, revamp our economy. Remember, the Chinese economy, we are talking of an economy of 1.4 billion consumers. So that's really a big plus in itself. And of course, our macadamia nuts are also becoming very important for the Chinese market, particularly the middle class. They're looking at it as a health snack. And so with that zero tariff, that is actually going to be another big plus for us.
Well, let's take you back to our top story where, as we mentioned, China's vice president and Kenya's deputy president are attending the Kenya-China Business Forum right here in Nairobi. The vice president of China arrived on Sunday for an official visit aimed at strengthening bilateral ties and expanding economic cooperation between the two countries. The Kenya-China Business Forum is focusing on China's decision to introduce zero tariffs on imports from 53 African countries with diplomatic relations with Beijing. That policy, as we mentioned, takes effect from the 1st of next month. Well, we can discuss this further with our reporter Robert Nagila, who is following the developments and joins us live from the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Robert, as we've heard, the Chinese vice president and the Kenyan deputy president, as well as other trade officials, are in attendance today. What's the latest you can bring us from there?
Oh, thank you, Mahia. Well, I can tell you that that session with the Chinese vice president and Kenya's deputy president has just ended, and they departed a short while ago. Now, while addressing the crowd, the Chinese vice president said that China was looking forward to partnering with Kenya on a number of fronts. He said that they wanted to strengthen economic and trade ties with Kenya, Kenya being China's largest trading partner in this particular region. On his part, Kenya's vice president said that he was looking forward to several meetings with the Chinese vice president, where, of course, trade was on the table, but they were also looking to see how Kenya could better leverage on this decision by China to introduce zero tariffs on all products from 53 countries that have diplomatic relations with China. Now, that also is the main focus for the Kenya-China Business Forum, which kicked off early. And they've basically been discussing how Kenya can leverage its position and its products and its brand to better serve its economy by taking advantage of this new policy by China, which kicks in on May 1st, just a few months from now. Incidentally, there's also going to be a launch which will be attended by the Chinese vice president and Kenya's deputy president this afternoon in about a couple of hours, where they're going to flag off the first consignment of Kenyan exports headed to China. Now, they'll leave on the Standard Gauge Railway heading to the port city of Mombasa, from where they'll take a ship. And these exports are expected to arrive on May 1st once this new policy on zero tariffs kicks in. So it's a huge, huge deal. There's a lot of Kenyan businessmen here who are really excited about this prospect, and they believe that this will rejuvenate Kenya's economy. It will allow businesses to build better and to hire more people, creating employment, but also to give something back to this country. So a lot of people here really looking forward to working closely with China on this new policy and to see how the country and businesses locally can benefit from this new policy. Mahia?
All right, Robert, thank you very much for that. Plenty to unpack from that forum that is ongoing. Robert Nagila speaking to us live there on the phone from the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Well, last month, Kenya secured an early harvest trade deal with China, granting duty-free access to 98.2% of Kenyan exports. As we mentioned, looking historically rather, Kenya and China established diplomatic ties back in 1963. That's just after the East African country's independence. More than 6 decades later, that relationship has evolved into a comprehensive strategic partnership anchored on trade, infrastructure development and economic cooperation. CGTN's Robert Nagila, who we just heard from, now reports.
It's been 63 years since Kenya and China established diplomatic relations. Over that time, China has emerged as one of Kenya's most important development partners and in recent years, its largest trading partner. In 2025, the two countries elevated ties to a comprehensive strategic partnership in the new era following President William Ruto's visit to Beijing. The visit yielded agreements across infrastructure, agriculture, health, education and ICT, aimed at accelerating Kenya's economic growth. Among the key infrastructure projects signed was the 371-kilometre extension of the standard gauge railway from Naivasha to the port city of Kisumu on Lake Victoria and onward to Malaba at the Uganda border. Construction of the project was launched last week. Also underway is the upgrading of the 175-kilometre Rironi-Mau Summit Highway, a key transport corridor linking Nairobi to Western Kenya. And in Naivasha, construction has begun on a geothermal-powered fertilizer plant expected to produce 480,000 tonnes annually. Over the past decade, the partnership has delivered more than 100 projects. These include the initial Nairobi-Mombasa Standard Gauge Railway, the Nairobi Expressway, the Thika Superhighway, and the Kipevu Oil Terminal. In energy, the 50-megawatt Garissa solar plant remains the largest grid-connected solar facility in eastern Central Africa. While in technology, Chinese firms have supported projects such as the Konza Data Center. The partnership is now shifting toward value addition and expanding access for Kenyan exports to Chinese markets. From May 2026, China will eliminate tariffs on imports from 53 African countries, including Kenya, a move expected to unlock new opportunities for exporters and further boost economic ties. Robert Nagela, CGTN.
Meanwhile, China and South Africa have continued deepening economic cooperation. In a recent interview in Johannesburg, Deputy Chairman of the Gauteng Provincial Legislature, Thulani Kunene, said the partnership has been mutually beneficial. China is South Africa's largest trading partner, and a new agreement signed last month will grant South African exports duty-free access to the Chinese market.
We believe that our relationship can take us forward in terms of mutually benefiting each other. We can benefit from the advances in technology from China, and we think that we've got the resources, we've got the young population, young people who are prepared to learn, and we've got entrepreneurs who are willing, and we hope that some of them will take an opportunity to go to China and also trade with the Chinese and sell, and we can sell more products from South Africa, from Gauteng to the Chinese, as much as we also buy products from the China. The distance between China and Gauteng is not a problem. We've got very good port services. We've got a port here in Joburg called City Deep. But we've also got very good freeways, good highways that go to the seaport, which of Durban and Richards Bay. So we think that we'll be able to trade easily, and as we're already doing. There's already high levels of trade between the the province of Gauteng and with, for example, with the Greater Bay province, Greater Bay area. And we believe that all this presents an opportunity for us to improve.
Mali has released more than 100 suspected militants in exchange for a truce in a fuel embargo imposed by an Al-Qaeda-affiliated militia group. JNIM militants have been attacking tankers bringing fuel into Mali, leading to devastating effects on the country's economy. Local officials and elected representatives say some of those released have returned to the central and northern parts of the country. Media reports say the releases were in exchange for safe passage of fuel tankers. Meanwhile, the Malian army on Saturday said it had killed around 40 militants, that's including a key leader, during a week-long operation in the Western Cays region. In a statement, the army said it destroyed militant hideouts, including 2 major bases, and seized a large cache of weapons and ammunition. Now, the troops also freed 12 hostages and seized more than 3,000 litres of fuel. Now, countries around the world have marked the first ever International Tiajiquan Day. In Cotonou, Benin, a Tai Chi event brought together both experienced practitioners and newcomers, united by a shared interest in the Chinese martial art known for promoting physical, mental and spiritual well-being. CGTN's Sharon Baranga now reports.
At a sports complex in Cotonou, an unusual scene is unfolding. Around 30 participants move slowly and in unison, practicing an ancient discipline not commonly seen in Benin, Tai Chi. Leading the session is Frank Nodufinin, a key figure behind the introduction and promotion of this Chinese martial art, or wushu, in the country.
Tai Chi Chuan is an ancient Chinese discipline. It is therapeutic, combining slow, fluid and circular movements. It harmonizes the balance between mind and body.
Though often seen as a sport, Tai Chi is deeply rooted in meditation and controlled movement. Its emphasis on precision and synchronization sets it apart from conventional fitness routines. For Frank, the practice is not just physical, it is a way to maintain balance in everyday life. Now serving as an ambassador for Tai Chi in Benin, Frank organized this event following the discipline's recognition by UNESCO as part of the world's intangible cultural heritage in 2025. It also aimed to introduce more Beninese people to the practice. The initiative has already had an impact.
I had stopped practicing for some time, but when I heard about this event, I decided to come back. I also want to encourage others who stopped to return and join a wushu club.
I started practicing wushu in 2024 because of my health. Tai Chi helps me stay fit, relaxed and balanced. It's a form of harmony for both the body and the mind.
The growing popularity of Tai Chi highlights strengthening cultural ties and cooperation between Benin and China. For organizers, this is just the beginning, with hopes that the discipline will continue to expand across the country. Sharon Baranga, CGTN.
Right, here's what's coming up on Africa Live Business. The International Energy Agency sounds the alarm over the escalating global oil crisis, calling the situation very severe. And why Africa must step up efforts to actualize intercontinental trade. Airlines are grappling with surging jet fuel prices amid the ongoing U.S. and Israeli war on Iran that has caused a supply shortage. This has resulted in customers bearing the brunt of surcharges and airlines struggling to manage volatile costs. Notably, right here in Africa, the continent is among the most exposed regions to both supply and supply disruptions and higher prices. According to financial and commodities analytics firm S&P Global, around 70% of jet fuel and kerosene imports to the continent flow via the Strait of Hormuz. Meanwhile, jet fuel prices in northwest Europe have surged to record highs, near $239 a barrel since the conflict began, according to LSEG data. Asian jet fuel prices are approaching $200 a barrel, close to recent records. Now, multiple airlines around the world are cutting back on the number of flights as surging oil prices push up fuel costs. United Airlines says it will reduce capacity by about 5% in the second and third quarters of 2026. They say the company could face an extra $11 billion in annual fuel expenses. Air New Zealand has cut around 1,100 flights through early May, affecting about 44,000 passengers. Scandinavian Airlines has confirmed plans to cancel about 1,000 flights in April. Vietnam's aviation sector is also preparing for possible cuts. Now, the U.S.-Israeli attacks on Iran have set benchmark oil prices soaring above $100 a barrel to its highest levels since 2022. Now, the extent of the crisis being felt in the transport sector across the world. Financial Times says the European Union has urged member states to lower their natural gas storage targets and start refilling reserves gradually to curb demand to ease spikes in energy prices. Now, the report says Energy Commissioner Dan Jorgensen has instructed EU states to cut filling target for gas storage facilities by 10 percentage points to 80% of capacity. The International Energy Agency is in talks with Asian and European governments over the release of more stockpiled oil due to the Middle East conflict. This is according to Executive Director Fatih Birol, who says there will not be a specific crude price level to trigger another release. Notably, IEA member nations agreed on March the 11th to release a record 400 million barrels of oil from strategic stockpiles to combat the spike in global crude prices. Now, the drawdown represents 20% of overall stocks. The IEA chief began his world tour in Canberra, saying the Asia-Pacific region is at the forefront of the oil crisis, given its reliance on oil and other crucial products like fertilizer and helium transiting the Strait of Hormuz. Now, after meeting Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, Birol will travel to Japan later this week before a Group of 7 meeting.
It is only 20% of our overall stocks. If needed, we can put more oil in the markets, both crude oil and products, if it is needed. So therefore, again, our stock release will help to comfort the markets, but this is not the solution. It will only help to reduce the pain on the economy. The situation is very severe. I can tell you that. In fact, as it started some 3 weeks ago, I decided not to talk to press 3 weeks. But last Friday, I thought I should say a few things because I thought the depth of the problem was not well appreciated by the decision makers around the world.
Meanwhile, NATO members and allies such as the Republic of Korea and Japan are coordinating efforts to reopen navigation through the Strait of Hormuz. This is according to NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, who was speaking amid the escalating U.S.-Israeli war on Iran. U.S. President Donald Trump has threatened to obliterate Iran's power plants if Tehran fails to reopen the vital waterway within 48 hours. His warning followed his earlier comments about winding down the war, now entering its 4th week.
I know there is a lot of debate in the US and in Europe whether this campaign of the president against Iran was necessary. And let me tell you, it is. It is crucial that the US is doing this. I know the president was angry because he feels that European and other allies have been too slow. The good news here is that since Thursday, a group of 22 countries, most of them from NATO, but also Japan, Korea, Australia, New Zealand, the UAE and Bahrain, most of the other countries from NATO, coming together to implement his vision of making sure that the Strait of Hormuz is free, is opening up as soon as that is possible.
Oil prices have jumped more than 40% to above $100 per barrel since the U.S.-Israeli war on Iran began. Most shipping traffic through the Strait of Hormuz, which supplies roughly 1/5 of the world's crude oil, has been halted since early March. About 20 vessels have been attacked in the area since then. These actions have their cascading effects on economies across Africa. Nigerian SMEs discuss the ripple effects on their businesses.
In Nigeria, SMEs are defined by the National Bureau of Statistics as businesses that have between 10 and 199 employees and assets. This excludes lands and buildings worth between 5 million and 500 million naira. While SMEs face major challenges like limited access to finance and infrastructure, the burden that comes with the increased cost of fuel due to the war in Iran has become a pendant of albatross on the category of business operators.
Increase of the fuel has affected our production, everything that we had to increase the prices of our stuffs, which in one way affects the customers too. So it has really affected us.
Ms. Obanure initially thought she had dotted all her I's and crossed all her T's when she did her research and chose a location with steady power supply so as to avoid paying extra cost on fuel to power generators. It was unknown to her that her business fate could be determined by a war in a foreign land.
So I moved in here in January. Before moving here, I did my survey, and the power supply was actually okay. So the following months, the power supply started malfunctioning. So I had no option than to switch to generator. We started buying fuel. I was almost at the verge of giving up when the price of the fuel went up, and I heard it was because of the war in Iran. So I was so depressed that I had to come online to voice out. I made a post. The post went viral, and an anonymous man came to my rescue. So that was how I was able to get a solar for my business. If not for the solar, by now I would have packed up.
Not all SMEs who come online to state their challenges can be fortunate to have some good Samaritan strangers come to their rescue. Most SMEs are struggling to get through the economic heat of this season. Mr. Ontoye, a welder in Sauka, Abuja, narrates his struggles.
Even the fuel, before this war started, we buy fuel at 1,060 naira. Unfortunately, from the filling station, it comes to 1,650. The black that we used to buy emergency, we buy at 1,200. But it's now 2,000 per liter. Diesel. The work we are doing now, if you tell the customers this is the amount of the work, they will say no. They will still pay the previous amount we are paying. They don't increase. The price of market don't change. We don't change our price. But now the materials we are buying, the price change. The motor we are entering, the price change. The materials we are using, the price change. But what we are doing, the price not change.
Besides the high cost of fuel, Nigeria is grappling with poor power supply, which has become a socio-economic menace not only to businesses, but all households.
So I don't know how government can help us on that. Because if you say we want to depend on light, the light is not constant. You can see now, everywhere now is dark out. There are only gen everywhere. Everybody is using gen, no light.
Arinze has become helpless over the present situation. So as to retain his customers, he alone bears the brunt of the high cost of fuel without passing the extra cost to his customers.
The matter now is the condition is what we are facing in Nigeria about this fuel issue and the war going on in Iran and the other countries. At times I would let me just increase the price of my service, but when I look at it, I was I don't want to scare my customers away because of the prices, so I have to keep managing it, and there's nothing I can do now.
As the conflict in the Gulf continues, world's energy supplies will keep being affected, and the global economy will simultaneously weaken. Nigeria is already witnessing a painful 39.5% spike in cost of fuel, according to global petrol prices. Like Obanure, Nigerian SMEs need the government at this moment as the Good Samaritan in their stories. Ian Kinywa, CGTN.
Now, Africa has created the world's largest free trade area by number of countries under the African Continental Free Trade Area. Infrastructure gaps, energy deficits and inefficient port systems still hamper cross-border trade. But as geopolitical tensions bite and global trade fragments, business among neighbors is becoming increasingly crucial. CGTN's Julie Shire now reports.
It's shaping up to be a turbulent decade for African economies as relentless geopolitical shocks weigh on growth and stability. From the pandemic to the Russia-Ukraine war, renewed trade tensions under Donald Trump, and an escalating Middle East conflict, the fallout is driving inflation, debt, and uncertainty.
Although we're on the back of decreasing inflation in many of the sub-Saharan African markets, this will have an impact on prices. One of the wonderful attributes of businesses on the African continent is its agility and its resilience. And no doubt that businesses will find a way to see through this conflict. Having said that, I do think that there will be pain economically, certainly for the short run.
Africa is being forced to look inwards, but challenges remain. Despite the promise of a single market under the African Continental Free Trade Area, moving goods across the continent is still slow and costly, held back by port bottlenecks, aging rail networks, and unreliable energy supply.
If you're looking at how long it takes a truck in Africa's ecosystem to get across the border, it's days. For this to really work, we need seamless integration, less talk and more action. And if we look at just a simple thing such as the access to capital, Africa's entrepreneurship and SME ecosystem makes up about 18% of Africa's GDP across the board, but investment is only 0.6%.
But change is underway according to the Standard Bank's Africa Barometer. The continent is on a positive trajectory as business confidence improves and investment gains pace.
We've seen supply chains move towards more intra-Africa trade as an alternative and looking more east and particularly China. From an intra-Africa perspective, infrastructure is improving. It's becoming easier to trade with ourselves. There's policies like the example used between Uganda and Kenya, making it easier for countries to trade with each other.
New digital payments and pan-African settlement systems are also reducing reliance on external currencies, cutting transaction costs and making cross-border trade easier.
It is significant to bring it closer to currencies and currency exchanges that are realistic for the economy that we operate in. We cannot be operating on dollars when a dollar is so expensive. It could mean, one, that capital is affordable. It could mean that trade is easier and more accessible. And it also would mean that things move faster.
Higher commodity prices offered some respite from the global fallout. The question now is how fast African nations can shift from extractive to high-value economies to strengthen regional supply chains and accelerate industrialization. Julie Shara, CGTN, Cape Town.
Right, let's jump straight into the sports now. We turn to South Africa, where South African giants Mamelodi Sundowns held their nerve under intense pressure and going down to 10 men to secure a place in the CAF Champions League semi-finals on Sunday. This is despite suffering a 2-0 defeat to Stade Malien in Bamako. Trailing 3-0 from the first leg, Thaddeus Nkeng and Haman Manjan netted in the first half to give Stade Malien hope. Sundowns had Aubrey Modiba sent off late on but held on to win 3-2 on aggregate. They will be joined in the last four by RS Berkane, who struck deep into stoppage time to seal a dramatic 1-0 victory over Al Hilal of Sudan.